Hey everyone, so in my last video on the Unified Comfort Panel, I unboxed it. I went from breaking the seal on that cardboard box, getting it powered up and downloading in about 10 minutes, which meant I didn't spend much time actually showing you the panel itself and what it kind of looks like in there. So I thought I'd make this quick video to show you the operating system and the control panel within inside of these new Unified panels and what kind of things you can do as standard. We also didn't peel the plastic film off last time, and I know people get a lot of satisfaction out of peeling these films off. There we go, that's that done. So here we are, and this is what it looks like when we power up the Unified panel, if you remember from the previous video, and we're presented with the home screen of the control panel. The Unified Comfort panels now run their own SIMATIC Industrial operating systems, and then on top of this we have the Unified Runtime environment with the control panel associated with it. I have got a camera set up here so we can capture what's occurring on the screen, but actually the first thing I'm going to do is enable remote access so we can just capture it on the computer in full high definition. So I was here last time we looked at this, but we got the network and internet settings here, and this is where we define the IP addresses of the panel. So we had the two interfaces, if you remember, X1 and X2, X1 being a 2-port switch and X2 being a single port, two separate subnetted Ethernet interfaces. So I'm actually plugged in on Ethernet interface number 2 right now, and I've given it an IP address in here, and you can see the sort of things you can set up, whether you want DHCP, whether you've been using DNS and that sort of stuff. And under general, whether you want to be able to view this via like an SNMP management tool. So if we go back to networking settings, it's also in here we get the ability to set up the remote connection. So again, this uses the same brand we're familiar with in the SIMATIC Comfort panels, which is Smart Server. So we can tick the box to enable Smart Server. So we're doing this on the panel, we're not downloading any runtime configuration here. This is all just done within the control panel. And then again, we need a password now for someone to access the remote access. So just like in the previous comfort panels, we get two passwords here, which allows us to set up perhaps one which should be operator monitor and one which might just be just monitor, you can't operate anything. So here we go, user 1, we can give them a password. We'll give it the classic 100 because everyone remembers that old default password. Of course, we no longer have default passwords, and I would strongly recommend you don't set them as 100. There's a reason we don't have default passwords. User 2 we won't bother setting up, but as an example, if you wanted to, you could say user 2 could have the password 200, and if we were to uncheck this box, this would mean he would only be able to access monitor only mode, wouldn't be able to make any changes. You can see down here that there is some more security now around this, and we can do this with certificates. Just for ease here, I'm going to turn off the security so we can easily access this panel remotely. And that should pretty much be it. We've now ticked the box to enable it. We've given it a password. So if we go over to the computer now, and I'll fire up good old smart client. I've already got the IP address in there. We'll hit the connect button, get the familiar password prompt, enter 100, okay, and there we go. I'm now remoted into the panel, and we can just capture it all on the screen here now then. Okay, so let's have a look at all the settings. So you can see on the left hand side we get our interface for the control panel. Clicking the home button will of course take us home, and we can hide it or minimize it if you like out of the way, just to go with icons rather than the full text and icons. So let's work down the list systematically and see what's occurring. System properties. So we get some general information here about the panel, what version of Runtime is installed on it, MAC addresses, all this nice sorts of stuff. So if we ever did have an issue with the panel, we can come here to find out some generic information about it. Display, you would have seen this in my last video. I went here to turn up the brightness, but here we can turn up the brightness of the panel. We can see that actually changing in real time on the real panel there. That's quite nice. If we were going to be mounting the panel in portrait mode, then we can obviously click the old portrait button, and now the panel is ready for portrait operation. So you can see that there. Obviously it makes no difference on the desktop, but on the physical panel you can now see it's changed without a reboot, in fact, which is how that was on the old comfort panels. That's pretty nice. Let's put that back into landscape. Okay, back to system properties, screensavers. Okay, so we can use the inbuilt screensaver if we wish. So just enable it, say how long we want it to wait until it comes on, and then whether we want the brightness of the screen to be dimmed when that screensaver comes on. Of course, you could still do your own kind of screensavers in the runtime system as well if you wished, with your own graphics and stuff being displayed. Let's turn it off just for a second. Update operating system. So here we can see a nice way of actually being able to update the operating system on the panel from a memory card or some other kind of USB stick that's plugged into the back with the firmware image loaded on it. So at the minute I don't have anything plugged in the back, so there's nothing to be found, but that's a nice mechanism to be able to update the panel without having to necessarily get out an Ethernet cable, get some software out and download into it. Pretty good. Reboot. Okay, so from here we can reboot the panel. So without having to go around the back and pull the cable out, we can just quickly click this button and it'll reboot the panel. And just like in the previous comfort panels, we've got a special reboot in maintenance mode. So this means it'll boot into a special boot sequence, which allows you to do additional features before it actually boots up into the operating system. Pretty nice. And performance. So here we can set up some alarming if the flash memory of the panel is heavily used. So they're more than just HMI devices now. These are panels that run, the WinCC Unified Runtime, but also the Siemens Industrial Edge runtime, meaning you can load them full of apps and for use in Edge and in runtime, meaning that you could be hammering that internal flash memory quite heavily, which could be reducing the lifetime of the panel. So this little alarm here would indicate if that is the case, and it'd let you know what's occurring. Of course, full details of that is in the manual if you want to check that out further. And I think that finishes off system properties. Okay, runtime properties, let's go have a look. Automatic runtime start, yep, that's pretty straightforward. Do you want it to wait for any time before going straight into runtime? And alarm buffer. So just like the regular comfort panels, this panel has the ability to buffer alarm messages without any additional storage media. It just uses the internal memory. And you can see here we also have the ability for enabling the alarm buffer there. Super. Okay, that's that. Well, we've had a look at network settings, so we'll go down the list now to security. Okay, so user management. So in here you have the ability to manage users on the panel. So the unified users are all now managed within inside of this little dialog here outside of the kind of runtime environment. In Tier Portal, it's also treated differently to how you might do this on the comfort panels, with users being managed as a project-wide setting rather than a device-wide setting. And these get downloaded into the panel. I'm going to show you this in just a minute. So let's just pause on that one for just a second. If we come back here, we've got security. So of course we can use encrypted transfers, encrypted downloads, remote access can all be managed via certificates. And we can see what's currently within inside of our trusted authorities, and we can import, we can remove these and sort of stuff within inside of the panel. And control panel access. So this is for if we only want specific people to have access to the environment we're currently in right now, the actual control panel. So at the minute we're at a default state, so ticking this box isn't going to allow me to do anything, because if you remember from our previous screen, user management, there's currently nobody logged in this runtime in this environment. So what we would need to do is set up a user who has the ability to change that setting, and then we can lock out the control panel if we so wished. And I will show you that in Tier Portal in just a bit. Or should we do it now? Let's do it now. Let's do it now. So if we were to go into Tier Portal, this was that crummy project I was making previous. The users are now managed within the security settings side of Tier Portal. So you can see down here we get some settings for our unified users with regards to what the password policies should look like and all those sorts of things. And then we get the actual users defined here with our groups and our roles. So as default, we've got some roles built in. We can see we've got a HMI administrator, which then allows us to do certain things. And this is all based off what rights we have access to. So down at the bottom here, we've got some rights. And if we have a look, we've got our SIMATIC Unified Comfort Panel rights. HMI1 is the terrible name I still have, the default name for the panels in my project. And we can see what rights you would have with this role. So we can't change these are default, so they just stay like this. But you can see here, there's a role called Control Panel Access. And this is what's being referred to in this one here. So if we want the ability to toggle this on and off, we have to be able to have this this right to allow us to do that. So why don't we create ourselves a new role? Just for fun, we'll call it Control Panel Access. And we can then say within this role, you have access to use the control panel. We could then go to users, give ourselves a new user. We'll just call him James, and then he needs a password. It's got to have some complexity built in here, so we'll give it that. And there we go. And then we'll say James is an administrator, and he has that control panel access role that we just saw. In order for me to now use this on the panel, in fact, actually, before I jump ahead of myself, why don't we add another user? Add a new user, and we'll call him Nick for fun, and we'll give him a password. There we go. Tick. And let's download that, but I'm not going to give him any of these access, so he shouldn't be able to do much on this particular panel. Let's give him HMI operate. Okay, let's hit the download button. Okay. Plugged into interface number 2. Let's give it a search. Oh, I know why that is. If you we haven't got to this setting yet, but service and commission transfer, you'll see here we can say, yep, we're enabling the transfer. We did this in our previous video. You'll see here that it says if we're using X2, we need to be using the Ethernet mechanism to transfer. If we're using interface 1, which is in the previous video, we use PNIE. So if we're on Ethernet interface number 2, which we are right now because we're using the remote access, we need to use Ethernet. So let's change that to Ethernet. And I mustn't have configured it in IP address 192.168.0.0.0.2. Connect. We found it. Let's hit the load button. And off we go. So we are going to load the runtime. Okay, and you'll see down here HMI runtime. Okay, runtime values. This is what we're after. So here we have the thing which says, do you want to keep the user information? Well, we don't, because we're going to re-download those users we just made and reset logs. But we're mainly interested in this field here, reset the users. So let's download that. We can see loading is complete. So now if we come here, we can go back to security, user management, login, and this is the lovely key panel that comes up there. I'll show you this on the screen. Why not do it on the screen? User is James, and here's, oops, my password, which has a bit of complexity in it. What's quite nice is you've got the little eye there, so you can actually see the password you're typing in. This is quite a cool feature. If you would not been able to log in, you can double check you're definitely typing your password incorrect. We'll give it an old login button, and there we go. We can see that we've now logged in. I'm currently logged in as James. We can also see Nick as a user. I'm an administrator, so if I want to, I could be adding users here on the fly as well for use on the panel. That's pretty cool. And I could also be deleting users, so if I wanted to, I could delete Nick. But the reason I've come here was that control panel protection. So if we come back here, we can say control panel access, enable. So the control panel is now protected. So if I was then to log out, So we can do that either through user management and click, we can do that through the, we can change user, will log us out, of course. Or this icon here is also log out. So let's click log out. There we go. I've now logged out as James, but the control panel is protected. So if I try and use any of these things, you'll see it's now giving me a password dialog to log in. Let's see what happens when we log in as Nick, who doesn't have the rights. Yeah, so Nick doesn't have the rights to use the control panel, so he has not been successful in gaining access. Super, just how we like it. So let's log back in as James, and there we go. We now have access to the control panel. Just so I don't get in a mess, I'll just quickly disable that for now. And yep, this button here then logs out the user. Obviously, if you click it when you're not logged in, it also displays the login dialog to allow you to log in. So that's security. External devices. This is pretty cool. We didn't have this in the old comfort panels, but the ability at the hardware level to deactivate the USB ports. So if you didn't want anyone plugging some malicious USB device into the back of the panel that might do something, then you can, of course, disable those USB ports, as well as the storage card slot. So if you remember before, there's two card slots on the back. Oops, let's go have a look here. So you can see there's the 4 USB ports. This is now upside down. I'll try and put it the right way around. But there you go. So you can see the USB ports are labeled there. This labeling, of course, ties up with the names in the control panel. And then you've got the 2 SD card slots. So this data one here, where you can store files, do your data login, this is the one you have the ability to disable. The system card is obviously for system functions. Ooh, my finger's activated Runtime. So let's put that back there. Where were we? So yeah, that's the hardware interface. It's pretty cool. Okay, what else we got? Language and region. So this is pretty nice. Everything that you kind of expect from your date and settings, and the ability to change your time zone. So your time zone is pretty cool because you're hopefully going to be using 1500 as the PLC, or 1200. But in the 1500 in particular, we have the ability to do alarming within the controller. This means that the PLC does the date and time stamping of the alarm when it occurs, and then issues it to all connected devices. So what's nice about this is if you were in a different region on this panel, then it would apply that time condition to the timestamp that the PLC is sent over. Pretty cool. Service and commissioning. So we saw this one just briefly, but here we can see the ability for when we set up the transfer modes, whether we're going to be using X1 or X2, or disable it altogether. And here we can set up the passwords for encrypted project transfer. We saw update OS previous. Backup, so the ability to take a manual backup, if you like, of the panel. You can see the sort of options you get here for that. And again, this could be done directly to I haven't got anything plugged into the panel, but a USB memory device or a storage card. Before I get to automatic backup, restore would then be the way of restoring that backup. Plug the USB stick back in, and that can restore the backup that you have stored on it. And of course, you can use this for serial commissioning of devices if you wished as well. So you could back up one panel and then use the USB stick to go and recommission another 10 to apply the same settings, user credentials, whatever, into the runtime. Automatic backup, this is where that system memory card slot comes in that I showed you on the back. So if you tick this, and then actually have a card plugged in, hit the old start button, then this means that the panel is going to be automatically backing itself up to that system card. The idea being, if the panel was to fail or get damaged, then you can literally get a new one out the box, system memory card, into the next one, and it would automatically restore itself, and you'd be up and running without any additional manual commissioning intervention that you don't need to download from Tier-Pool, anything like this. The panel just takes care of itself. You don't need this card in order for the panel to run, but obviously dropping it in gives you that added security in terms of safeguarding the operation of the machine. And finally, trace forwarder. So the panel's HTML, of course, the runtime is HTML. We use JavaScript as part of that. And what this trace forwarder is to do is around script debugging. So there's a trace function within there for if you get any scripting errors within your JavaScript or whatever it might be. And this allows those errors to be forwarded on into the runtime environment. And finally, best to last, if you like, we then have apps. Now this is pretty cool because you can see here SIMATIC apps. So at the minute we've just got the SIMATIC Edge platform, but this is obviously going to be something that's going to develop over time with additional SIMATIC apps that you can add in to the panel to give additional features. I'm not going to cover SIMATIC Edge. My good friend on this YouTube channel, Nick, will most likely be doing a video for us very soon about enabling SIMATIC Edge on these panels, getting Edge apps running on it and managing them and the likes. So I'll leave that for him to pick up. But you can see these are all the default apps that get installed as standard into the operating system for us to use here, or of course within the runtime environment of the panel. So we got a dock viewer, and we can actually run those up now just so you can see what they look like. So you can see this is using LibreOffice, which is an open source version of Office, but this means we have the ability to open Word docs directly on the HMI panel, and this is effectively what the LibreOffice Word doc app looks like. Let's go back to apps. We've got our email client, so of course we could be setting up the ability for sending and receiving emails off of this device, and the email client gives you the setup for that. So I obviously haven't set that up, but you can see, look at this, we get a lovely wizard that will take you through all the steps you need to set up the email client on here, but I don't want to do that right now. Okay, that's the email client. Interestingly, actually, I didn't show you this feature. Let's do it with file browser. So if you actually bring your finger, I'll do it on the screen. So if you bring your finger down the bottom here, this brings up the taskbar. So you can see here there's actually nothing running right now, no apps are running. You just got your default icons for keyboard. So there's the keyboard. The home button is obviously the home button for the control panel, which we're in, so we're already in the control panel. And then the play button is obviously the runtime. So there's the runtime running there. So even when we're in the runtime, we can bring up the taskbar and go home to bring us back to the control panel. But what's nice is if you've got one of these apps running, so let's run the dock viewer. So there's the dock viewer running. If we go look at the taskbar, we can see the dock viewer is running there. So if we actually go back to the control panel, ooh, not runtime, control panel, and go back to our apps, let's do it over here again. We could fire up the file browser, start the file browser. And again, you can see all these icons now coming up with the apps that we have open. Let's go back, let's open the media player, start. There we go. So this is what I was talking about with the amount of apps you can now have running on the panel simultaneously. And this is just through the unified control panel. In addition to this, is obviously the Edge platform. Let's go look at we've looked at the Word browser there, we don't need to see that again. Let's go have a look at file browser. It's pretty cool, nice little interface for browsing all your devices. We've got trash, that's nice. And the ability to look out onto Windows networks as well for network shares. We've got the media player, so you've got VLC installed as standard on the panels, pretty cool, play anything through that. What other apps are on here? PDF viewer, okay fine, web browser, okay fine, and then of course the print configuration, so the ability to set up printing directly on the device for reports or print screens or whatever you might be interested in. So there you go. This is pretty cool. It's using a nice little web interface hosted to set up any kind of printer you might be interested in. Look at that, it's showing two apps in one, the web interface and the print configuration. Super. So there's the web browsers, and then finally we got our settings where we can go through and uninstall any of these apps if we don't want the operators to have access to these kinds of features on the panel. And there we go. That's pretty much a walkthrough of the control panel of the new SIMATIC Unified Comfort Panels. Hope you enjoyed it. Next video I'm going to do will be showcasing the template suite, so we can see how this terrible runtime that I still have downloaded onto my panel can be improved with standard templates and the wizard to automatically generate these into Dearborn. Stay tuned.